link for it. Here it is. I'll post the link up so our listeners can review it as well. Because I was going to cover this on the show today anyway, and I figured why not cover it? Well, I have you to talk about it. This one comes from the Daily Caller. There's a new report out. This just broke yesterday. Internal Phoenix VA emails indicated that a medical review of 40 deceased veterans showed that 3 of the patients on the list had received the care they needed, they would be alive. And, that was one of the big things we talked about with the whole wait list scandal and everything, was folks dying while waiting for care. This takes it a whole step further because these were ones that were actually receiving care and died at the hospital because they didn't get the appropriate care. Some of the things in here were poor records management, where consults weren't being filed. The doctors basically weren't talking to each other. Sometimes they were listing treatments as completed, and that would automatically kick back, and nobody would follow up on it. This is scary, scary stuff here.
Yeah, and my personal opinion about those 40 deaths at Phoenix, everyone responsible should have been charged with negligent homicide and let them prove they didn't do that. That would have forced all of these records to come out as they defended themselves. But we just had the IG, the VA IG in here a couple months ago, and they were sent away packing after a week, and they never opened the doors for them. They never did anything. They just told them to leave.
Wow.
And they get away with that. In my opinion, 75 to 85% of the employees at the VA should be veterans.
Oh, absolutely.
And in the upper echelon should be veterans. I was listening to a joint committee hearing about the VA, and all of these individuals made the comment, from the VSOs to the senators and congressmen at the hearing, that it's only about 1% of the total 350,000 employees. 1%. Now think about that. That's a brigade. So if you took the 1% of the VA employees that have caused all of these nightmares across the country at the close to 1,800 different clinics and hospitals that the VA runs, you're looking at less than 2 per clinic have created these problems. So get all of those employees that they think are the bad apples, create the VA horror brigade, send them to the Middle East, and if they've been able to destroy the VA the way they have, they could take out ISIS in 2 weeks. There's no way that it's...
Yeah. Unbelievable.
You like my idea of that?
I love it. I absolutely love it. And, it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but, it's such a valid point. And, I've had, tons of whistleblowers come on the show and raise these issues. And I have the utmost respect for those folks, putting their careers on the line and, simply doing the right thing. And
right.
You're absolutely right. We should have more veterans employed there. And I'm not sure if you're aware of why there's not. We've been talking about it on the show the last couple of weeks. A lot of it has to do with the union agreements. The VA jobs actually have to be offered to every member of that federal employees union before it can go to an outside source. And the only job at the VA, there's only one that is specifically reserved for veterans. You know what that is?
Janitor.
It's the janitor. How ridiculous is that?
Yeah. And there have been a number of reports out there. The reason the union doesn't want the veterans in there, and especially in upper echelon positions, is because the veteran will probably force the issue on treatment. And they would be calling these people out for what they're doing. They don't want that. And that's why the next law that they're trying to pass would have to do with being able to fire these union people. And I keep trying to tell people it's not going to happen, because once they open the door to firing these union members at the VA, that crosses the boundary now. Now you can go after all federal and state unions like that. It's not going to work. It's not going to happen.
Yeah,
They're never going to pass that law.
The unions have far too much power to let that happen.
Right. And why should there be a union at the federal level? I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And here in Phoenix, they found that the working hours were almost less than 8 hours a day. Now, why are the clinics basically at 4 o'clock? You walk through the Phoenix VA, and it's like a ghost town. So why is that? Why aren't they open until 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night?
And things like that are the reasons why I cannot take, at face value anything that the VA says. I mean, the director of the VA secretary was, just testifying that, the wait list stuff is done. We're at 97% of, appointments being made on time within 30 days. They keep painting this rosy picture, and yet we still keep getting these same old stories. If they were really serious about it, you would think they would use the Phoenix VA as an example and completely, shift everything around, make it all perfect, and then at the end of the day say, hey, look, we fixed, this is how bad, Phoenix was, and look how great it is now. Now we're going to do it everywhere. And yet
exactly.
Yet they're not doing that.
Well, there's a gentleman that took over DLA, Defense Logistics Agency, Bean to Bomb. And that's exactly what he did when he took over. He went in, checked things out for about 30 days and realized who the people were that were causing the problems. And the next day he went in and reassigned their positions. Didn't change their retirement, didn't change the money they were making. But instead of being in charge of contracts, they suddenly were in charge of doorknobs, pencil erasers, carpet tacks, just anything to keep them and get them out of the positions that they had that were being used for their own self-benefit. So if you went in and revamped the VA by reassigning these upper echelon administrators to the director of Staples, these people would leave. You'd be able to move people up into these positions that truly care about the veteran. And if we look at 30% bad VA employees, we're looking at 60% good. Right. So if you get rid of the 30% by reassigning their positions, the trouble always starts at the top. I mean, the fish rots from the head down. So these people, like Sharon Hellman here in Phoenix. She didn't get fired for malfeasance. She didn't get fired for what she did about those 40 veterans that died. She got fired for taking a bribe.
Right.
She got Beyonce tickets.
Yeah, and nobody talks about that.
No, but here in Phoenix, everybody knows. And the vendor that actually did it paid for it with a check on his company's letterhead. That's how they nailed her. So like you said, wouldn't you want to then take where the epicenter of the entire VA scandal and revamp that one to be the poster hospital for all of the VA? This is how you do it. Mm-hmm. It's like somebody that I know, she recently went into Phoenix VA for the first time. She's not a veteran, although she suffered immeasurably from Agent Orange DNA issues. Her husband was exposed to it extensively. She had 3 stillbirths. The one child that did survive from that marriage is severely disabled because of Agent Orange DNA issues. First time she ever walked in there, and she was just blown away by it. She said it has a feeling of it's just negative everywhere she looked. She was, going through all the different things she would do to brighten it up and make it feel better. Mm-hmm. And just, many times when you just make the physical look better, you can, that's why the way you dress has a lot to do with the way you act. We know that. So if you dress it up a little bit and you start having a better attitude with the employees and start recognizing that these veterans are the only reason that you have a job, the only reason you live in a free society is because of the sacrifices of vets, you change the attitude of the way you treat these people. But it starts from the atmosphere that you create. We had 2 suicides in Phoenix in the main entrance in the head, or the bathroom or latrine, depending on which culture you're coming from.
Right.
They blew their brains out inside that head.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we've had a number of suicides here in Phoenix at the VA in the parking lot and at the main VA facility. So,
yeah, and actually that's been that's actually been a sad statistic, because it's actually happening more and more across the country. I can think of almost 20 in the last year at different VAs across the country. And what does that say? That to me is a very explicit, hardcore message. That, hey, you are letting us down. We are here to get help, and it's the very place that they ended their lives. I mean, you can't get a more powerful, and sad message than that.
I know. We had one that did it at the main VA offices on a Sunday afternoon. Blew his brains out.
So sad.
And a lot of this has to do with the protocol of constantly giving drugs. And now we've heard, I've lost 5 of my brothers to suicide.
Wow.
And the last one had to do with chronic nerve pain that he had suffered on the week before Hell Week at Bud's training. He shattered his leg, left leg in 3 places. 2 of them were compound fractures. And so he had extreme nerve damage. But the VA said it shouldn't be hurting that much, so they took his pain medication away. And he and I had worked out together back before my brain injury. I was a 450-pound natural weightlifter, 585 seated press.
Nice.
And he and I worked out a lot, so I knew what he could handle when it came to pain. And I asked him one day, I said, what are you looking at, 1 to 10? What is it? He said, it's a constant 11. I said, wait a minute, how can you possibly survive that?
Right.
And he said, I just get drunk, pass out, and wait until it comes off, and then I get drunk again. I said, John, that's going to lead to massive depression. He goes, I'm already there. And about 3 weeks later, I found out that he had taken the business end of a 45. And because they cut his meds off, they said there's no such thing as chronic nerve pain. Well, we know that's not true.
Yeah, I deal with that myself. These stories, they get me so upset, because these deaths are preventable, in 99.999% of the cases. And it's things like the VA that are failing in their obligation to do the right thing. And while we've been talking here, just to kind of to go back to our original topic with the hyperbaric treatment, while we were talking, I did a little web search just to see if the VA had talked about this at all. And I posted 2 articles up in the chat thread for the listeners to look at. The first one is from the research wing of the VA, and it was a study that they did and released in January of last year. And their study claims that hyperbaric oxygen therapy has no benefits for post-traumatic stress and TBI. They claim there's no evidence of it whatsoever. Now, folks, like I always tell you, when you look at studies and you look at statistics, you always need to look at how the study was done, who did it, and what their what is their agenda behind it. So that's what the VA said January of last year, that there's no evidence at all that it helps with brain injuries or post-traumatic stress. But then the second article I posted is from, let's see who did this one, the National Library of Medicine, the National Institute of Health, big-time organization, right? Their study, released in 2013, so it was actually before the VA study, says quite clearly that they affirmed the effectiveness of oxygen therapy with mild traumatic brain injury, post-concussion syndrome, and post-traumatic stress disorder. So, whose word do you take here? Do you look at the National Institute of Health? They're also government funded. Or do you look at the VA, who is under fire about their treatment of these things, and they say, no, this isn't worth doing?
Right. There's actually a psychiatrist, and psychiatrist equals drugs, who said that he has a few tips and tricks that he can teach somebody that has a traumatic brain injury to live with it.
Really?
Was his attitude. He's one of the senior psychiatrists at the VA. I won't mention his name, but
tips and tricks. Huh?
Yeah, tips and tricks on how to live with a TBI. You know, I keep hearing all of